it's Porsche's best-selling model worldwide, and it nearly sold 100,000 units last year. However, in India, it hadn't really taken off, and there are some very good reasons for that. It's just been given a mid-life facelift with a number of key changes that could stand it in better stead. And I'm here in Mallorca, which I promise you was sunny just yesterday, to drive it exclusively for you. Now, it's understandable that a facelift wouldn't change much on the outside, but at the front at least, the changes to this Macan are really hard to spot. The overall shape is the same, of course, but unusually the bumpers haven't changed much, and neither has the bonnet. The headlamps, however, have moved from bi-xenons to adaptive matrix full LED units, which look really aggressive with the new Porsche 4.DRL signature. Other changes include new wheel designs up to 21 inches in size, customizable side cladding strips, and new paint shades. However, it's around the back that you see the biggest change. The tailgate has been bifurcated by an LED strip that joins the tail lamps, much like the Panamera, Cayenne, 718 and the new 911, but slightly differently executed. I like it. Now, it's not very common for cars to have their interior remodeled considerably for a facelift, but that's exactly what they've done with the new Porsche Macan. Where the old car had a 7.2-inch touchscreen, which was quite a reasonable size, they've shifted over to a nice widescreen 10.9-inch touchscreen, just like the one in the Cayenne. So big and wide is the new touchscreen that they've had to actually re-engineer the air conditioning vents. The AC vents have now been moved under the screen, and the screen basically stretches across the center of the dashboard. That aside, it is still a beautifully finished and solidly built cabin with switchgear that clicks crisply and doors that shut with authority. Two columns of buttons cascade down on either side of the gear selector as before, although some of them have been switched around. You don't get the touch-sensitive buttons like you do in the new Cayenne and Panamera, but frankly, I prefer the tactile familiarity of physical buttons. The car I'm driving at the moment is the base model Macan. It's just called the Macan, and it uses a 2-liter 4-cylinder turbocharged petrol engine. This engine is unchanged from the one already sold in India with 245 horsepower and 370 Newton meters, and it is just as we remember it. Those numbers might sound inadequate for an SUV, a Porsche SUV no less, but this motor does a pretty good job of moving this car's bulk. Sure, it's not what you'd call strong, but it is sufficient. What you do miss, however, is the sound of a bigger V6 or V8 engine. But more than the engines, the Macan always stood out for its handling, and thankfully that hasn't changed one bit. Now, you have to remember that the Macan is based on the previous Audi Q5 platform, not the new one, and so it dates back quite a way. That said, Porsche engineers have done such a fabulous job of re-engineering it, it really does feel like a sports car around the bend. There's a certain degree of heft to the way everything feels in this car compared to SUVs of a similar size like a Q5 or X3 for instance. It's not quite as light to steer, and the ride, despite being on air suspension, does feel a little bit firmer. But that small compromise comes good when you start to push harder. It's an absolute pleasure to grab onto this tiny steering wheel and hustle what is still a mid-size SUV at the end of the day around tight corners like these. And yes, while the 2-liter engine is sufficient, this chassis is so capable it just begs for more performance. And luckily, there was a more potent version of the Macan available for test at Mallorca. Now, while the base Macan with the 4-cylinder engine is good, this is the one you really want. It's the new Macan S. It uses the 3-liter turbocharged petrol V6 from the base Cayenne, and here it makes 354 horsepower and 480 Newton meters of torque. There was a Macan S before the facelift too, which wasn't sold in India. It too had a 3-liter V6, but this is a different new generation engine which abandons the twin-turbo layout for a single twin-scroll turbo placed within the cylinder banks. Not only is it more powerful, it's more responsive too. The key difference from the base model though is not just the numbers, but how effortless this thing feels. Whether you're at city speeds or out on the highway, this one just feels a lot easier at picking up speed. Where the 4-cylinder would start to feel a little bit strained at highway speeds, this one just gets the job done without any fuss. So yes, while the 4-cylinder Macan does feel adequate, this one feels good. And it's not even the most powerful version of the Macan that will be there. Yes, they will be introducing a Macan Turbo, and that will use the 2.9-litre twin-turbo V6 from the Cayenne S. And of course, the other reason you would choose the 6-cylinder Macan over the regular one is the sound it makes. That's a proper sound. That's what you want in your sports SUV. It's not rumbly like a V8, nor is it buzzy like an inline-4. It's something pleasantly in between. The reason I'm relishing this Macan S is there may actually be a chance we get it in India this time. As I'm sure you know, Porsche has ditched diesel engines entirely, so it could just bring the petrol S to fill the gap between the base model and the top spec Macan Turbo. And unlike the new Cayenne, there is no hybrid variant of the Macan. This old gen platform simply doesn't support it, nor does it support rear wheel steering, or the 48-volt electrical system and many other technologies newer Porsches get. But it's hard to complain about what wasn't possible when there's so much about the Macan that's right. The facelift is minor, but that small extra bit of aggression is welcome, as is the new infotainment system. And above all else, it is still quite possibly the sharpest handling SUV on the planet right now. I can't wait to drive it on Indian roads, and with a launch schedule for the latter part of 2019, anticipation levels are certainly through the roof.